Welcome back everybody to another Python tutorial. Where are we at now? Well, a couple months ago I released some videos that showed us how to web scrape the SEC, and that was definitely a popular series amongst the finance people just because reality is there's no documentation out there, so at that point there was something that you could follow and people seemed to respond pretty well to it. And so obviously I've been doing a lot more exploration on that particular topic, and I'm ready to introduce kind of, I would say, part 2, and then part 3 is going to be focusing more on the form parsing. So the form parsing is coming along, but I kind of wanted to get something out there because I already had it, kind of ready to go. So I said, well, why not? Let's just kind of start with it. In this particular video, we are going to be talking about EDGAR queries. And so if you remember in previous videos, we had a situation where if we wanted to parse a bunch of different filings, we went to the index endpoint, basically. You can at least think about it like that. We would grab a certain CIK number or central index key, as the formal definition goes, and we would then go and get all that particular CIK number's filings, and then we would go through each filing and we would get documents. And so I've kind of improved on that method a little bit, and so I'll be kind of sharing that in another video. But what if you want to do like a more specific query? Well, luckily on the SEC, we can do that. And so if you go to the sec.gov and you go to filings, you can go to EDGAR Search Tools. And so this will take you to this particular page, and you'll see basically all the different types of searches that we can do. Now, I'm still kind of exploring certain ones of these. If it kind of, I would say, warrants it, I'll probably do a separate video on that. But in this particular video, we're going to be doing the company or fund name. And so this is kind of what I would say is not necessarily specific. Well, it's specific, but you can also make it broad. And this is also one of the more confusing things because there's no documentation as to how this is going to be working from a programming perspective. So there's no like documentation that says, hey, you can put in this parameter and this parameter. A lot of this I just came from experimenting a little bit. And so, for example, if you want to do a fast search, you can always just put in the CIK number or the ticker symbol. So in this example, I'm looking at Microsoft. And if we do that, depending on the search, it will take you to this page. And this basically gives you all of the filings for the particular entity that you've searched. In this case, it's Microsoft. Now, in some cases, depending on the age of the company, you could have hundreds of filings. I mean, literally hundreds of filings. For newer companies, you might not have as many. But the nice thing about this particular searching method is it allows you to do more specific searches. But I kind of want to bring up something. Keep an eye on the URL up here, because we'll find that's very useful if we kind of know what's going on. So for example, if I do a 10K search, okay, so that returns all the 10Ks. Did my URL search change? It did. Now we have this new parameter. Type is 10K. Exclude, there's some other stuff on there. I have, again, documentation. But basically what you'll notice is if you play around with each one of these little kind of search methods, it will simply change the URL. And so now we can kind of think of it like an API in a sense. And at this point, it's pretty good. So now we have basically all the 10Ks that belong to Microsoft. We can also see that some of them do have interactive data. At least those are the ones that basically have the XML files that we can parse. But in this case, if you go before 2011, they don't. But the important part about this is how you do a very specific search. So, you could obviously do a specific company, or in some cases, you could just do a broad search for like companies in Washington, for example. I did a search like that. I wasn't able to do, I believe, all the 10Ks for every company out there. I don't know if it was allowed me to do something like that. I mean, I guess I could just try it like right now. If you get rid of the CIK number, then naturally you would think, yeah, so that's not a valid one. So I think it does have to have a CIK number. But if it doesn't, you can do technically state searches and things like that. So what we're going to see is how to mimic this kind of behavior from Python. So we want to be able to mimic where we basically send a request like this, where we pass through a bunch of parameters and it gives us the result that we're looking for. But there's also kind of an extra thing that we have to kind of, I would say, work with, which is the output. Right now, it's HTML code, which isn't necessarily a problem, but when it comes to parsing, I rather have something a little bit more structured just because it'll make the process of parsing the information easier. And what you'll find is if you just attach output equals Atom at the end of it, then what you will get is a nice XML version of all the same data. This is the one you're gonna wanna parse. Do not parse the HTML one if you don't have to. Parse the XML version. This is more consistent and it will make your life 10 times easier. Again, in our video, we're gonna be parsing the XML version. So what it does is it gives you each entry. It gives you a category level, so like a term, a label, content type. You get the basically like the what is it, section number or something like that, ascension, I don't know, file number, the href to that particular file number. So that's kind of nice too. This will actually take you to that particular file. You can see the filing date. You can see the filing href, so you can actually get to the what is it, the HTML file that contains this particular filing. So all the documents that went with this particular filing, the filing type, the film number, the form name, and the size. And then we also get some other stuff. So the ID, the another link ref to, I think, the same filing, summary type, and then again the title. So very useful information, and we will find that this is again the way we're going to want to go. And then if you kind of go down to the bottom, if you were to have in some cases multiple, you would actually see a link down here that's called next. In fact, I'm going to try to zoom in just a little bit so you guys can see that. You'll see another link here that will say next, and that next link will take you to the next page, because obviously depending on the type of search that you can do, sometimes you'll get hundreds of filings back, and so you might want to get every single one of them, and in that case you would have to go to the next page. And then if you go up to the top, you'll also find some company info as well. So this is things like the address, the zip, what is it, the name, state, all kind of good stuff. You'll kind of see some stuff related to the what is it, the SEC and stuff like that. So you can see the SIC. You can see a search for that particular SIC. So again, if you wanted to go and do a search for that particular SIC number, then this is the link you would use. You can see the CIK number. Again, if you were going to do a query for that CIK, you can see confirm name, the fiscal year end, Washington. If you wanted to do a state location query, so this is one where I was saying, hey, if you want to just get all the companies that exist in Washington, that would be your state location href. And then we also have the state of incorporation as well. So a lot of good stuff that we can obviously get access to. So with that being said, let's jump into it and we'll get started. All right, so the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be importing our request library. We're going to obviously be making requests, and so if we're doing that, we need the request library. And then we're going to import, well, we don't need pandas in this one. Got myself confused. So we're going to import beautiful soup as well. We're going to obviously be working with a lot of, XML type data, and beautiful soup does make parsing that HTML and XML data a lot easier. But in this case, we're going to primarily be doing the XML. So we just want to insert that. And as a side note, I will be releasing some documentation with this particular video. And so it's going to be right here. I guess before we kind of go to actually making our requests, we do need to kind of have an idea as to what parameters we can pass through. Unfortunately, there is no documentation on this. And so this is, again, just me experimenting and seeing, the URL changed. It looks like that's a new parameter. So what can I play with that? And so what I've found so far is that these seem to be all the parameters. There might be an extra 2, but I'm still kind of trying to figure that out. So the first one is the action. So that's kind of basically the type of search that you're doing. By default, it seems to be set to get company. The CIK number is obviously the central index key for the company that you're searching. We have Type. So type is basically we're specifying the type of form that you might want. So 10Ks, 10Qs, any kind of form you might want. This is what you would be specifying. That's the parameter. Date before. So you might want filings that are before a certain date. Keep in mind it is in this type of format. So year, month, and day. Date after. So this is, I want all the filings that come after this particular date. Owner. So owner, I got a little confused on. So I guess the SEC. So basically, the SEC requires that the filings come from a company director and company officer, and so we can specify and say, hey, we only want the filings that come from basically an executive in a certain regard, or we can specify, hey, we don't want those particular ones. So um, there's different ways you can do it. So there's basically exclude. I think the other one is only. So if you set it to only, it will only return forms that related to director or officer ownership. You can also do exclude, which is you don't care. And then by default, it's going to be set to exclude. And then include means it would also include any of the forms that are related to, again, the director or officer ownership. So that there's that one. Start. So again, if you have, say, like 150, forms or something like that, you might not want to start at 50 or 0. You might want to start at 150. This is really going to come in handy if we have multiple pages. So it is an optional one. State, if you want to do a company state, the filing number, the SIC number. So this is the standard industry classification. So if you want to do by particular industries, this is how you would do it. Output, you can do normal HTML or Atom. So if you don't define it, it just comes back as HTML, but we're going to be working with XML. So we're going to want to make sure that we, use Atom. And then count. And so you can specify the number of documents that you want to see. The max is 100, but you can set it, I think its default was they said 40. But you maybe, I only want to return the first 5 or something like that. So you would use the count parameter in order to specify that. So that's just, again, some information. It's going to obviously be helpful when we're making the query. Shocking, right? So that's just, again, for you guys to know. So what I'm going to do is we will do just a simple, I think what we'll do first is we'll just do a simple request, and then we'll kind of get more into the actual parsing of it. So the first thing is we're going to define our endpoint in a sense. So we're going to say endpoint equals our HTTPS, where is it? ://www.sec.gov. It's CGI-bin, and then it's browse-EDGAR. Perfect. So that's our endpoint. We need to define our parameters, and so we'll call it param dictionary. It will be a dictionary, obviously. We need to specify the action, so the type of search that we're doing. In this case, we're going to do a get company, so we're going to be searching for company. We're going to specify a CIK number. Let's just take Microsoft. Microsoft is always a good one. So keep in mind, you don't need the leading zeros for a CIK number. You just need the actual numbers themselves. So you can disregard the leading zeros. And then in this case, hey, maybe I want all the 10Ks, right? So I'm going to say specify the 10K, and then I want the date before. So I want all the 10Ks that come before 2019, 0101. So I want all the ones that come basically before 2019. Okay, what else? I want owner. I'll just leave that to the default, which is exclude. So I don't care about the ownership reports and stuff like that. Start, we'll just keep that blank for right now. We want to start at 0. Output, well, this one we do want to make sure we specify. I want to make sure it's Atom. And then we will say count. Well, there might not be 100, but give me up to the max, which is 100. So we'll do that. And then we will define our response, And so again, we'll call it response, request, get, and then our URL will equal our endpoint. And then our params will equal our param dictionary. And then I'll put my little space there. And then from here, we will need to parse it. But just so you guys can kind of see what it's going to look like, we will do response.content. If it will let us, obviously. So depending, obviously, on the content, sometimes the request can take a little bit of time. But you can see kind of right here, we got a bunch. I mean, we got a ton of stuff, which is awesome. But now from here, we got to parse it, right? Because, if we can't parse it, then it's kind of really pointless. So we will first create our soup, which will take our beautiful soup object. We will pass through our content from the response. And then we need to specify our parser. Well, in this case, we're just going to use XML, or is it? I think it's LXML. I think it's that one. Yeah, it's LXML. And then, you might want to also, like, something I like to do is just like print status code or something like that. So I would probably put that up here just so that way, the user can kind of know. So we'll say print response dot status code. And then I might want also the URL. So we'll say response dot URL. Perfect. Again, just so you kind of are aware, like, hey, it worked. Because, if you're doing like 20 of them, you don't want it just kind of to fail necessarily. Okay, so the status code was 200, which was great. And then we also have the URL. So that way, again, if you wanted to go here and actually look at what the page would look like, this is what it's going to look like. Now, obviously, when I printed it, it didn't look like that because it was all kind of mushed together. But at this point, it's working kind of like what we were expecting, which is awesome. So we'll do kind of, we'll do like a company search next, right? So we'll basically kind of negate a bunch of this stuff, and we'll kind of do like what I would call like a broader search. So we say, hey, maybe we just want to get like, just Microsoft or something like that. Then in that case, we might want to do something a little bit broader. So really, for the most part, I think something you should just kind of do is just take this and copy it, because for the most part, it's exactly the same. We're just going to be removing parameters, if anything. And really from here, I'll kind of show you. We'll leave that. Well, I kind of deleted too much. I'll leave that. I'll remove that. And then I'll say company equals, we'll say Microsoft. Perfect. Okay, so it looks like it was successful. Keep in mind, this is still it's going to come out with the XML version as well, but that's okay. You're going to notice though, with this one, you don't get, as much coming back. This is just a company search. This is just something very specific. You're really just saying, hey, I want to look for a particular company, and kind of what you could get from here. I'm going to change the output a little bit just so it's a little bit easier to kind of intuitively look like, oh, what would I do? So in this case, there's actually multiple companies that have Microsoft in the name. So it gave us each one of those. But here, you could technically do that, and then you could take the href to the one that you're looking for. So really what it's going to look like, if you were parsing it, at least from a high level perspective, is you would again see each entry, and you would have to kind of see and say, hey, which one kind of matches what I'm looking for? So maybe you had a zip code, or maybe you had if you had a CIK number, you wouldn't really be doing this one, but you could. And then you could also get the href to that particular one. So again, just different ways to get kind of, I would say, different types of information. I'm not necessarily saying one is better than the other. It's just kind of saying which one works for you at that particular point. Oh, this one is Microsoft. Oh, they must have like a holding company. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Some one Microsoft way. Yeah, it's got to be a holding company. You'll kind of see that with some of the larger companies. Some of the larger ones can have like, seven or eight different entities, and it gets confused, especially with some of the financial ones. Good lord. Those ones are fun. But you can see here, good way of just getting that information and then being able to go a little bit further and get more of the information that you're looking for. That's really what it's meant to do. So, with that being said, I am going to kind of cut the video here just because the next one's going to be focusing more on the parsing. But here, you've got your content. Next, we're going to go and actually parse it. So, if you have any questions, obviously put them down in the comments below. Again, I might update the documentation a tiny bit, but for the most part, you can kind of see how these things work. So ideally, this should kind of make sense, I would hope. But I can also understand that the SEC is not necessarily the easiest thing to work with sometimes. So again, any questions, put them down in the comments below. Also, if you could, please make sure to like the video. We always appreciate the support. And if you're not already, you definitely want to make sure you subscribe to the channel so that way you can kind of see new content on the SEC. A lot of finance related things come out, and that way you're staying up to date with all this fun stuff because it is fun. You know, it's a pain a little bit. It's obviously a pain, but it's good, interesting stuff. And the best thing is it's free. So you don't have to pay anybody to get all this wonderful data. You just got to be a little bit creative sometimes. So thank you again for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next video.